And now for your top stories of this hour. US Trade Representative Greer stated that active conversations are ongoing with trade partners and none have indicated plans to withdraw from current trade deals. This comes after reports that India has postponed a trade delegation to Washington amid uncertainty over US tariffs. Meanwhile, EU lawmaker Bernd Lange has proposed delaying the vote on the EU-US trade deal, citing the changes in the legal foundations after the court ruling. The uncertainty arose following the US Supreme Court's decision to strike down key tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, with Trump subsequently imposing a temporary 10% tariff, which he later increased to 15%. US Trade Representative Greer stated that active conversations are ongoing with trade partners and none have indicated plans to withdraw from current trade deals. This comes after reports that India has postponed a trade delegation to Washington amid uncertainty over US tariffs. Meanwhile, EU lawmaker Bernd Lange has proposed delaying the vote on the EU-US trade deal, citing the changes in the legal foundations after the court ruling. The uncertainty arose following the US Supreme Court's decision to strike down key tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, with Trump subsequently imposing a temporary 10% tariff, which he later increased to 15%. US Trade Representative Greer stated that active conversations are ongoing with trade partners and none have indicated plans to withdraw from current trade deals. This comes after reports that India has postponed a trade delegation to Washington amid uncertainty over US tariffs. Meanwhile, EU lawmaker Bernd Lange has proposed delaying the vote on the US-EU trade deal, citing the changes in the legal foundations after the court ruling. The uncertainty arose following the US Supreme Court's decision to strike down key tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump, with Trump subsequently imposing a temporary 10% tariff, which he later increased to 15%. We are now being joined by Dr. Ajay Dua, who's a former Secretary of Commerce and Senior Economist, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How might the reassurance from the USTR Greer that trading partners haven't indicated plans to pull back influence market confidence and political support for the proposed trade agreements?
I'm a little perplexed at what's happening around, particularly in the United States pronouncements after the US Supreme Court's verdict. It was first announced that they are going to be levying a 10% duty across the world and on all the countries. That means later on a reconsideration, the proposal seems to be, no, 10% isn't adequate, because the law under which they want to impose this levy, Section 122 of the Trade Act, that article allows them to go up to 15%, but limits it to 150 days. So suddenly, now everybody, including the European Union, its biggest trading partner of the US, they find that they will get subjected to a 15% trade tariff, even though what has been agreed to between them, US and EU, when the EU president had visited the US and the deal was struck there, that was lower. So suddenly finding that because of internal difficulties in the United States, the president's powers having been curtailed, and for the 150 days under the existing law where he's allowed to levy up to 15%, the European Union will also, all the European states will also end up having to pay 15% higher than what it was before. So it's certainly going to be a cause for concern for those who had earlier been offered or entered into an arrangement of paying less than 15% tariff on their exports to the US. The ones who are paying more, including China, 34% or 33.5% or something like that, they might be happy that for them, President Trump's tariff has been brought down to 15%. So it's a kind of that's why I said that this is a mixed up thing, but the fact that as of now it can be the presidential power is limited to 150 days, that seems to be the only relief. That beyond that, probably, unless the US Congress endorses what President Trump wants, they'll have to go back to the situation which was earlier prevailing. That means roughly a duty of about 6.5% across the world.
And in what ways could differences in this tariff policy, such as what's obviously went from 10% to 15%, what could this still pose challenges to advancing trade deals, even if partners are currently right now not withdrawing?
I think it's going to cause a degree of confusion because on the one hand, they are being subjected to 15% duty for the next 5 months. And I can understand from where the President Trump is coming from when he's hiked it up from 10% to 15%, because so far the deals which he had, or the levies which he had imposed on various countries, including India, which was subjected to a special attention of an additional 25% because of its oil purchases from Russia, the average was 13.5%. So he doesn't want to lose out on tariffs because what was the inflow by way of customs duties. So at 10, he would have lost 3.5%. At 15, he probably makes a little more than what the pace at which he was getting earlier. So I would think that going forward, President Trump may need to kind of see that at a higher rate of 15%, that people might be reluctant, several countries might be reluctant to switch over from trading with the US. One, higher tariffs. Second, unpredictability. What would happen after 150 days, one doesn't know. So there could be a degree of diversion of trade from instead of being to the US, new deals might come up. There will be new markets explored very kind of intensively by the European Union as well as all others. And once deals are struck with other countries, I fear that the predominance of US being the trading partner of most countries, including particularly the advanced ones, may not remain for too long.
Thank you, Ajay, for joining us here today on NewsX World. Thank you. Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah